Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut a stylish waistcoat with a shawl collar. So if this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. Let's dive right into today's video. So here is my pattern, and I've gone ahead to mark out the basic measurement, which includes the shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waistline, and my shoulder to top length. So I'll be using 5 inches away from my waist to do that. Now next, you're going to mark your shoulder divided by 2, and you're going to come down by 1 inch. This dress does not have a sleeve, so we are not adding ½ inch at the armhole. So now I'm going to go ahead to connect from that 1 inch all the way to the shoulder point. And after marking that, you want to go ahead to find your armhole or chest line circumference, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. I'll go ahead and mark, and I will rule out that line as my chest line. Go ahead to place my curved rule, and I will draw a straight line at this point. So now I'll go ahead to divide this into 2, and I'll go ahead to mark. From that point, I'll be going in by ½ inch, and after marking that ½ inch, at the lower part of my pattern, I will go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. Now I'll place my curved rule connecting from my armhole down to my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'll go ahead to extend it to the upper part of my pattern. So after I'm done doing this, the next step is to mark our dart intake. So before marking our dart intake, I went ahead to mark my basic neckline of 3 by 1.5 inches for the upper part of this pattern. So we are drafting out the back pattern first before going ahead to draft the front pattern. Now I'm just going to go ahead to connect that line from my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5, and I'll go ahead to connect all the way down. So next, I'll be marking a dart intake of ½ inch on both sides of my waistline, and I will be connecting it upwards. So first of all, go ahead to mark this, and I'll connect all the way down. But before that, mark 1 inch away from your bust line and connect, and at the other side repeat the same process. Now I'll be connecting this all the way to the lower part of my pattern, and also repeating it on the other side of my pattern. So at the other part of my pattern, I'll go ahead to divide my armhole into 2, and I will connect to create that princess dart effect at the back of my pattern. So now I'll just go ahead and use my marker to mark this all out. So after I'm done doing this, I'm just going to go ahead to insert my body measurement. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4 and add 1 inch for sewing allowance. I won't be marking my under bust circumference for this pattern because this is a blazer. I'll mark my waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace, and add my sewing allowance of 1 inch. At the top length, I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4 and add my sewing allowance of 1 inch. So this is a blazer, and you don't really need much allowance on this dress. So I'll just go ahead and connect from the bust down to the under bust. So when I was connecting, I realized that I connected this at the wrong part at the upper part of my pattern. So I'm just going to go ahead to place my ruler, and I'm going to go ahead to readjust it upwards. So after I'm done doing this, I'll just go ahead to use my marker to mark this out to make it more visible for you to see. After marking that out, I'll go up by 1 inch and connect this to the rest of my pattern. So I'll just go ahead to take that 1 inch up all the way at the lower part, because this is the back pattern. I just want it to be a bit shorter than what we have at the front. I'll go ahead to trace this out. So before I go ahead to cut out the back pattern, I will go in by ½ inch from my waistline, and I'm going to connect all the way up to the other side. This is to get rid of the bulginess at the back of the dress and to make your blazer fitted. So you can as well go ahead to replace it at the waist side at the other end, or you can just leave it this way. So I'm just going to go ahead to cut this all out, and after this we'll be moving over to cut the front pattern. So you can use this actually to cut your front pattern and just add your lapel in front, but I'll be making a fresh pattern on how to cut this for the front part of this pattern. So now here is the front pattern. If you notice, I have a line in front. This is my button allowance and I'm using about 1.5 inches. Now I'm going to go ahead to mark out all my basic measurements, starting from my shoulder to bust line, which is 9 inches. And after that, I went ahead to mark my shoulder to waist, sorry, under bust, but we are not making use of that. I marked my shoulder to waist, which is 17 inches, and the top length or the blazer length is 22 inches. That is 5 inches away from my waistline. And I'm going to go ahead to repeat this, and I will draw a straight line connecting all these dots that I have made. So now I'll go ahead to mark out my measurements. So I'll mark my shoulder divided by 2, which is 14 inches divided by 2. I have 7. So all this measurement is starting right after my button allowance. I'll go down by 1 inch, and after that I'll mark my neckline of 3 inches by 3 inches, but you still be readjusting that later. I'm just marking this to serve as a guide for this pattern. So now I'll just go ahead to connect this all the way from my shoulder slope to the neckline of my pattern. And after that, I'll go ahead to mark my shoulder divided by 2 at that point, and I will be marking my chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. Now I'll place my curved rule and I will draw out a straight line with a straight part of the ruler. Now I'll measure what I have from the bust to the chest line, and I'll go ahead to mark it all the way down to my pattern, and I will place it, and I'll be drawing a straight line to connect all the way down there. So after I'm done doing this, go ahead to divide your armhole into 2. Now you'll be going in by ½ inch, and after that you'll be marking your bust circumference divided by 4, which will serve as a guide to draw out your armhole. So now I'll connect from that point down to the shoulder point of my pattern. So next, you're going to go ahead to mark your nipple to nipple divided by 2, or your bust pan divided by 2. So mine is 7 divided by 2. I have 3.5. So all your marking is going to start from your button allowance, and I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to connect, drawing a straight line just like we did for the back pattern. So now I'm going to be marking ½ inch on both sides and come down by 1 inch from my bust point. Connect this all the way up, and also connect this to the other side of your pattern. So after you're done doing this, you're going to measure about 4 inches down your waistline, and you're going to connect your dart to that point. Repeat this at the other side of your pattern also. So after I'm done doing that, I'm going to go ahead to use my marker to outline this to make it visible for you to see. So the next step you want to take is to go ahead to insert your body measurement, and it's going to start immediately after your button allowance. I marked my bust circumference divided by 4, added 1 inch for the sewing allowance. At the waist, I marked the waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake. You're going to replace this and you'll be adding 1 inch to your sewing allowance. So now on the lower part, you're going to mark your hip circumference divided by 4, and you'll be adding your sewing allowance. So for this blazer, I'm using just 1 inch for the sewing allowance. You don't want to have sewing allowance for your blazer. So after I'm done connecting, I'll just go ahead to use my marker to mark the rest of my pattern out before we go ahead to work on the princess dart at the upper part of this dress. After marking this out, you want to go ahead to divide your armhole into 2. Now I'll place my tape, fold it up and mark. So after you're done marking that, you want to go ahead and connect this all the way down to your bust line this way, and I'll use my marker to mark this out to also make it visible for you to see. So while marking this, make sure that you don't really have a pointy edge from your bust point. So at your armhole, go ahead to mark ½ inch on both sides of that line, and you're going to connect it all the way down. And at the other side also, you're going to repeat the same process. You're going to connect from that ½ inch that you came down from this side, and you're going to connect it all the way down. So actually for this front, I'll be adding this just to make sure that when I'm joining my pattern to the other side, it's not going to be smaller because of the front pattern. So I'll just go ahead to replace that ½ inch on both sides, which is 1 inch, and I will reconnect it back to my armhole this way. I'll go ahead to use my marker to outline this part of my pattern and also at the upper part of my pattern. After drawing out my pattern, I went ahead to add another pattern paper on top, and that will be serving as the space to cut out the collar part of our dress. So now I'll just go ahead to trace out the lower part so that the upper part will be visible when I'm also cutting it out. So I'll come down by 1 inch from my bust point and I'll mark. So from there, I'm going to connect from my neckline of 3 inches down to that point this way. So after I'm done drawing out, I'll just go ahead to measure the neckline I have for the back pattern. And what I have is about 3.7 inches, and now you place your tape and you'll be marking that 3.7 inches upwards. But before marking it, go ahead to tilt your tape a bit. Now at that point, I'll go out by ½ inch just to make sure that your collar is going to relax at the back very well, because you're going to cut this collar together. Now I'm going to go ahead to connect it back, and I will blend it back to my pattern this way. And from there, you're going to measure the desired length for your collar. I'm using 3 inches from the middle part. You can go ahead to reduce yours, but when I'm sewing, if I'm not comfortable with the size, I'm either going to reduce it or increase it. So if you notice it's not so straight from what we have at the thumbnail, and I'll just use a freehand sketch to curve it, and you can just check your measurements if you're not okay with it. So now I'll just connect to outline what I have on that point, and this will be your button allowance in front of your pattern. So going to the side of this pattern, I'll be going up by 1 inch at the upper part, and I'll go ahead to connect this all the way down to the lower part of my pattern, because what we have in front of this pattern is a little curvy in front of the blazer. So after this, I'll just go ahead to cut the rest of my pattern. So if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel at this point, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and also join us when we are sewing this particular pattern or dress on my channel. So you can also follow me on my second YouTube channel, which is Draft with Maki. We also have drafting tutorials up on that channel.